Honda has always been infatuated by speed, performance, reliability, and build quality. It's the reasons why Honda has been on top for so long. With their daring designs, high ceilings, and amazing build quality, it's hard to argue against Honda and their motorcycles. And today we are going to focus on one particular motorcycle series, the CBR, but more specifically, the CBR Fireblade. Honda's goal with the Fireblade was to produce the world's best superbike while still upholding Honda's values like reliability and build quality. So sit back and relax while I take you down history lane and we see just how this legendary Fireblade started. And while I take you down there, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button to help support me and my YouTube channel. And the best part is it won't cost you a dime. Now, diving into the history of the Fireblade, we will have to start with the very first Fireblade. Actually, hold on, because the Fireblade's history didn't actually start with their very first Fireblade in 1992, but in fact it started all the way back in 1987 where Honda released their very first sports series, the Hurricane. Now, I can't go into every single detail about the Hurricane, that will have to feature its own video, but this is where the Fireblade started, so we need to go over this very briefly. So, in 1987, Honda released their very first Hurricane series. There were 3 of them, which were known to us as the CBR1000F, CBR600F, and CBR750F, all wearing the Hurricane name tag. Now, out of these 3 bikes, can you guess which one eventually became the foundation for the Fireblade? Yes, the CBR750F actually became the Fireblade. The CBR1000F eventually turned into the Blackbird, but we'll get into that in another video. And the 600F turned into the 600RR, which will also be featured in another video. But the 750 actually was the very first Hurricane that turned into the legendary Fireblade. The CBR750F Hurricane is an extremely rare bike. It was only released in Japan and is nearly impossible to find in the United States. It was carbureted-fed inline-4 748cc bike that made about 105-ish horsepower to the crank and in the neighborhood of about 50 foot-pounds of torque. And it had a hefty curb weight of 493 pounds. So by modern standards, it wasn't a very fast or agile bike, but back in 1987, it was state-of-the-art. The 750F was very similar to its big brother, the 1000F, with the exception of the engine. However, the 750F actually shares many parts with the VFR. Some of these parts were the forks, brakes, and calipers, which were all directly from the VFR 750. The CBR 750F also had Honda's signature gear-driven cams. However, the CBR 750F did not sell well. It was a good bike, but there was just a better bike out there, and that was the VFR 750, which was outselling the 750F by quite a lot. So as I mentioned earlier, the CBR 1000F eventually turned into the CBR 1100XX Blackbird to become the fastest bike in the world at that time. All the while, Honda had a very different plan for the CBR 750F. Its destiny was to become something much greater than the Blackbird. It became a Fireblade. Our first Fireblade made its debut in 1992. Honda took the CBR 750 engine and increased its stroke and displacement up to 893 cc's. This gave our very first Fireblade 122 brake horsepower and 65 foot-pound of torque. Honda's main goal with the Fireblade was for it to be known for how lightweight it was, and I would say Honda achieved that by making their very first Fireblade's curb weight just 454 pounds, which in 1992 was seriously an impressive feat. To put that 454 curb weight number into perspective, Suzuki's 92 GSX-R 750 had a curb weight of 516 pounds, and Kawasaki's Ninja ZX-R 750 weighed 470 pounds, and Yamaha's FZ 750 weighed 489 pounds wet. All these bikes had smaller, weaker engines too. Honda's Fireblade was in a category all on its own. And in 1994, Honda made their second generation Fireblade. These changes are pretty minor though, with the most obvious change being the headlights and the upper fairing. Honda ditched the iconic looking round headlights, which I still have yet to forgive them for, but they did improve engine efficiency and added a new fully adjustable front fork. Honda also made some improvements to the gear shifter and upper cowl, among some other minor changes. And in 1996, we saw the third generation Fireblade. Although it looks very similar to the second generation, it was vastly different. The fuel tank was redesigned to be shaped differently to make the seating position more aggressive. Honda revised the swing arm and frame along with a revised fork and shock. The handlebars were also raised up a little bit, and they also made some changes to the exhaust and fuel pump, and as a result, it dropped a very small amount of weight. The engine, however, was very different. They were able to increase the engine displacement from 893 cc's to 918 cc's, which increased the power to 128 brake horsepower, and they also added a brand new throttle position sensor to make the bike a little snappier. And in 1998, Honda was eager to update their Fireblade once more, and they brought to us the 4th generation. Honda continued its goal to make the bike as light as possible by redesigning over 80% of the Fireblade's engine parts in an effort to reduce friction and weight. The results were a 450-pound curb weight and better aerodynamics, along with a whole new look. And in the year 2000, we saw the 5th generation. This Fireblade had a completely new engine which was rebuilt from the ground up with a full new redesign. It was also the first model in the CBR series to feature a fuel injection system. The new engine's displacement was 929 cc's, which is why people refer to the 5th generation as the 929. Not only was the engine completely redesigned, but so wasn't the frame and bodywork. Also, it featured a full titanium exhaust. With these changes, Honda was able to reduce the curb weight down to 428 pounds. And the new engine made a massive 150 brake horsepower and 76 foot-pounds of torque. The 929 Fireblade was a major statement by Honda to everyone else that they are still the top dog and no one will be able to stop them. And in 2002, we saw the 6th generation. Honda bored out the older 929cc engine to a 954cc engine. Along with that, larger injectors, radiators, and remapped fuel injection were adopted, which resulted in a jump to 154 horsepower. Despite having more displacement, Honda was able to reduce the weight further to 424 pounds. The 954 is the lightest Fireblade to ever exist, even to this day. Then in 2004, Honda brought to us the CBR1000RR. This was Honda's first 1000RR Fireblade, and this is considered the 7th generation Fireblade. This 998cc engine was completely all new and featured 2 independent fuel injectors per cylinder and a direct air system, which resulted in faster throttle response and an increase of power, 172 horsepower to be exact. Honda also added in an undertail exhaust along with many other changes, like adding the first Honda electronic steering damper, which is an industry first. This steering damper would allow the bars to move freely at low speeds while turning, but stiffen up at higher speeds to keep the bike safer and more stable. A longer swing arm was added to prevent the bike from wheeling as easily thanks to the major horsepower increase, and along with that, many other minor changes. These major upgrades came at a price though, as the curb weight was increased all the way up to 458 pounds. Following Honda's tradition of revamping the Fireblade every 2 years, in 2006 we saw another redesign of the Fireblade. This was the 8th generation. This CBR featured the exact same engine developed in the last design. However, newer intake and exhaust ports were redesigned, and adjustments to the shape and timing of the valves raised the efficiency of the engine, which improved the torque range. The brakes were also upgraded from 310mm to 320mm, although the discs were thinner and overall resulted in a lighter and more compact caliper. There's also a massive list of other changes that were done, including a higher compression ratio, red line was increased from 11,650 RPM to 12,200 RPM, and a larger rear sprocket was added. A whole new exhaust system was also implemented, although Honda did keep their iconic undertail exhaust, and along with a slew of other changes to the suspension, brakes, frame, swing arm, and fairings. And in 2008, Honda continued to follow another one of its traditions of redesigning their Fireblade from the ground up every 4 years, and as a result of that, we saw the 9th generation Fireblade. This bike featured a completely new redesign of the fairings along with a new 999cc engine. Honda ditched their undertail exhaust in favor of a traditional side mount exhaust in an effort to reduce weight. Honda's new engine had titanium valves, an enlarged bore, and a reduced stroke, a new ECU, along with a larger ram air system. The results were an increased redline to 13,000 RPM and a modest 175 brake horsepower. And just 1 year later, in 2009, colors were changed and an optional electronically controlled combined ABS braking system was added, along with some new turn signals. This is considered the 10th generation Fireblade. And in 2010, the 11th generation was released. A smaller flywheel diameter and other changes were made to make the bike smoother and add more low-end torque. Along with that, the throttle operation was refined to make it more controllable to compensate for the flywheel and crankshaft changes, and some minor exhaust changes were made as well. And in 2012, we saw the 12th generation. This was the 20th anniversary of the Fireblade and featured revised fuel injection and featured the new Showa big piston fork technology, along with updated bodywork and an all-new LCD instrument cluster and new 12-spoke wheels. Honda kept the same engine though, so only improvements were made to the aerodynamics slightly. And in 2014, Honda tweaked their Fireblade slightly more with a retuned engine for additional power, along with lower clip-ons and a new windscreen. Also, they added a performance package known to us as the SP variant. The SP variant added in 43mm Öhlins forks, an Öhlins shock, Brembo brakes, a lighter weight subframe, a new cylinder head, intake tract and exhaust system. Newer pistons and connecting rods were also added, and a different set of handlebars and foot pegs were added as well to be more track focused. A bubble windscreen, solo C-cal, and tricolor paint scheme are also added to give the Fireblade a unique look. And in 2017, on the 25th anniversary of the Fireblade, Honda revealed the 13th generation Fireblade, which was completely redesigned again from the ground up, which added a whole new, more powerful engine, and the bike was lighter than ever before. In addition to all of this, the Fireblade had an updated instrument cluster once more, and along with that, a whole slew of electronics were added, including traction control, wheelie control, rider modes, and much more. The results of this new engine jumped the horsepower up to a massive 189 brake horsepower, and Honda was able to reduce the curb weight by an unheard of 33 pounds, which resulted in the lightest Japanese leader bike to this day at 433 pounds. Looking back, it is incredible how the Fireblade started out as a 748cc sport bike and slowly morphed and evolved into the superbike weapon we know today. The history is incredible, and you can see how Honda was constantly innovating and changing up their beloved Fireblade. The Fireblade went through a lot of changes throughout these generations, but one thing never did change, and it was Honda's vision on making a strong, lightweight sport bike that would compete and be fast along the racetrack, and while still being a solid street-friendly bike as well. Well, street-friendly for a superbike, that is. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe to my channel as I make more content like this every single week. Thank you again for all your support. Take care.